It is 5:31. I'm Judge Cordell, the chair of the task force, and this is a meeting of the Special Task Force at San Jose State University. And as we begin, first I welcome our task force members and welcome members of the public who are here and those who are watching and or listening. We'll go around the room. If you will, please introduce yourselves, and if you'll just state your name and then your affiliation, if you're a student or whatever, okay?
Gabriela Gonzalez, student.
I'm Marcos Pizarro, faculty in Mexican-American Studies.
Maria Luisa Lanís, faculty, sociology and interdisciplinary social science.
Wayne Wright, administrator, athletics.
Gary Daniels, fourth year, political science major.
Rick Callender, Vice President, California-Hawaii State Conference of the NAACP.
Chris Cox, lecturer, faculty, Department of Sociology and Interdisciplinary Social Sciences.
Bernadette Shane, former faculty trustee, retired, Humboldt State University.
Gabriel Rodriguez, student and AS Director of Intercultural Affairs.
Willie Hagan, President, Cal State Dominguez Hills.
Peter Lee, third-year student, Vice President of Associated Students.
Ellen Lynn, Director of Counseling Services.
Michael Randall, Academic Advisor, Academic Advising and Retention Services.
Linda Hayden, faculty member and chair of the Academic Senate.
Hi, I'm Diana Zan, fifth year.
There are some members that are not present, and we're going to proceed. Most of our members are here. I thank you all for being here, and once again for volunteering your time, your talent, your energy to the work of the task force. So, first, you have a handout in front of you, and it is recommendations of the task force. At our last meeting, I asked task force members to now, based upon all of the information we've gathered and based upon the fact-finding report by Mr. Moye, to bring forward recommendations, if you have any, about what we can do moving forward, lessons learned, how to ensure that we have a campus climate that is a welcoming one. And the recommendations basically generally fell into two categories: residential life and campus climate. So what I've done, I've received recommendations from a good number of the task force members. By the way, all of this information has been made public. It's online and accessible to anyone. But today, and for purposes of our moving forward with the recommendations, what I did was take all of the recommendations and put all of them together according to subject matter. And that's the document you have in front of you that says first submissions. And so you'll see subject matter: faculty, administration, and staff, residential life, Frosh orientation, reporting procedures and policies, and campus climate. And I think that pretty much covers all of the recommendations that were submitted, and you can see we have quite a few. Before beginning, there's a second handout you've just received, and it is a draft overview of diversity master plan action items. Linda, is it Hayden or Hayden?
Hayden.
Linda.
This came from Bill Nader.
Thank you. Well, you brought it forward to us, and thank you so much, because this is also going to inform the work, our recommendations, because we don't want to duplicate things that are already happening. Okay. All right. And finally, before we begin, it has come to my attention, and it will be in the news tonight and tomorrow, that the student against whom the bullying was targeted he and his family have filed a claim against the San Jose State, California State University, San Jose, against naming president of the university, naming a resident assistant, and other unknown agents and or employees of the university. I have a copy of the claim, and it is not a lawsuit. It is a claim, because if you intend to sue a public entity in California, you must first file a claim, and then that entity has a certain period of time, generally 6 months, to consider the claim and either deny it or grant the claim. And this is a claim requesting damages in the amount of $5 million. And it has been filed by an attorney. So I have this claim here, and if you have not seen it, you can actually access it pretty easily once you read articles in the paper. There will be a link to it. I have it here, and I'm certainly willing to, I've shown it to Gabrielle and to Willie, and I can certainly hand it down if you want to take a look at it. Let me make just one comment about that claim. My comment is, so be it. That our work tonight is not about lawsuits and about criminal actions. It's about recommendations based upon facts that have been determined by the independent fact finder retained by the university. So I don't dismiss it. I just believe that it's not relevant to the recommendation process that we're engaged in now, but it is out there, it is public information, and it's something we should not run from or hide from. So that being said, I'd like to proceed. Anybody, anything they want to say before we get going? All right. So we're going to proceed now. I envision using these 2 hours to go through these recommendations. Some of them are duplicative. Some of them you may, I want to get a sense, a consensus about recommendations. I don't want people's egos to get caught up in, well, that's my recommendation and you better accept it. This is not about egos. This is about doing what's best for the university, meaning students, staff, and faculty. So, Gary?
Actually,
Pull that mic. You can pull it down.
I actually did have a comment, but I wanted to let you finish your statement before I made my
A
comment.
comment about?
About the claim.
Sure. We'll take that in just a second then. Let me just map out what the plan is for this evening. To spend this time going through these recommendations, subject matter by subject matter. And I was stressing, let's keep ego out. If there's a recommendation we think is not worthy of going forward, fine, let's say it, let's be upfront about it. It is my hope that we will work by consensus. We'll get a sense from the group about what recommendations we want to move forward. It's likely we will use this meeting and our next meeting to get these all together, because we only have, this is our 4th meeting, we have 2 to go, so I envision this meeting, next meeting, that's a total of 4 hours, less 6 minutes, to go over the recommendations, and our final meeting will be then to basically present these final recommendations to the university. So, Gary, just a brief comment, if you will, so we can jump into this. Go right ahead.
Right. I just wanted to say that as a student who has, at least for the last year, tried to make campus climate issue a high priority on the administration's priority list, I just wanted to emphasize that the campus climate and the campus experience of students of color has been an issue long before and has been after this hate crime occurred. So it definitely, the claim should have only so much bearing on our decision-making here. Because campus climate has been an issue for a while, so.
Okay,
Just wanna make that comment.
thank you. Anybody else? Linda?
It's a quick update because it's an email I just got that regarding the claim. We understand that the claim was filed today, but was filed with the wrong agency. Therefore, there's no pending claim before the California State University, but we will contact counsel, let them know of the error and proper filing.
And from whom is that email?
Patricia Harris.
Okay, so Patricia Harris is the
Media.
media person for the university. And just so everyone, I don't know if you all got it, it says that as far as the university's position is that the claim was filed against, I guess, the improper party.
Wrong agency.
The wrong agency, and therefore the university deems it not to have a claim against it at this point. So I don't know if it's an error that can be corrected.
They're saying that they will contact the counsel for the family.
Right, so we'll see what happens on that. So, are we done with the claim discussion for now? And thank you for the update. And we'll move forward. So, sorry if we just kind of take these by subject matter, and we'll just jump in. So I've categorized this first one as faculty, administration, and staff, meaning recommendations having to do with these 3 entities, and there are 9 of them, and I have put in parentheses the name of the person who made the recommendation. So let's do this. It's a little tedious, but I think it's worth it. We can do one of 2 things. We can just go down them, or you can just say, tell me the ones that you feel you don't want, you feel shouldn't go forward. So what's your pleasure? Do you just want to take each one? Ellen?
Can I just make a correction? There's a typo on my
Of course, and
part.
I apologize. I took 2 hours this afternoon to pull all these together.
No,
and
I
do
saw
this
it was
fashion.
my error. so,
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that.
Go ahead.
Number 4 should be campus-wide instead of campus-side.
Okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to go down each one briefly? And Linda, what do you want to do?
When I look at them, there's an awful lot of overlap or even redundancy, so I'm wondering if we can consolidate rather than take
Sure.
the time for each.
Sure. All right, so let's do this. One of them that has come up a couple of times, let's just take the first one, all right? Create a sustainable diversity education program for faculty, staff, and administrators in the long term and the short term. That came from Professor Murray. And if we look at, what about number 2 as well? So we have 1, 2, I'm just trying to check off, and we have number 6, faculty and staff recruitment and hiring should reflect that's a little different. That's different. So how about number, okay, 8, provide workshops, training for faculty seeking ways to integrate diversity into lectures, discussions.
See that as a sub under number 9?
No, that's good stuff. I think it's pretty significant to, you know, it's part of the training, yes.
Yeah, I can-
Got it. Number 9, all right, and how about number 5? What about that one? Is that-
It would go under also because.
Okay, so part of it. And what about, okay, so what we're left with, not checked off, I have is number 3, that's recruitment, let's hold that aside. Number 4, sustainable campus-wide diversity education program, isn't that part of?
Yeah.
Okay, let's put that in. Number 6, that's recruitment and hiring. And 7, campus administration should reevaluate its role and relationship with faculty. That recommendation, Delorme, if you'll state that you're here and tell us your name and your affiliation, and then I'll address it.
I'm Delorme Maquistobal. I'm an alumni with San Jose State and also the director of the Office of Human Relations.
Thank you. So on this one, my sense is it's a bit too nebulous. It's not concrete enough. And I told you, these recommendations, if we want anything to happen, they have to be explicit, concrete, definitive. So I get the sense and the spirit of this, but I don't feel a specific action. So, excuse me, Gabrielle, any comments, anybody wants to add on that? Because my sense is we might want to include that in some language that we put in when we get these recommendations all formalized, but I don't see it as a separate recommendation. Comments? Yeah, Chris.
I have a comment. I agree with you. I think, however, though it's worth us revisiting that one and taking some time to flesh it out. I do think that it could be, depending on how it's configured, something that stands on its own.
All right.
And that doesn't come under.
So let me ask Delorme, this was yours, would you think about this and for our next meeting, see if you can come up with something concrete? All right, thank you. So we're going to defer on that one. And so I have 2 left now. I have number 3 and 6, which deal with 1, commit to the aggressive recruitment of female faculty and faculty of color, and ensure that they are retained, promoted, and tenured. And then number 6, faculty and staff recruitment and hiring should reflect the diversity of the campus and the community of Santa Clara County. Those are connected. It's anybody, okay, so I'm going to connect those 2. That was these. We have now covered all 9 with the exception of number 7 that Delorme is going to work on. Is there anybody that's troubled by going forward with any of these recommendations? I am going to, at some point, use executive privilege here by kind of getting them together so they're not 9 separate things and pulling them together, combining all the language. I separated them out because these were separately brought to me. So is there anything that anybody else wants to add, take away from this set?
Have 2 and 5 been put together?
2 and 5 are, yeah, that's the diversity training. That's all part of diversity education, I guess.
No, this is about RTP.
Art,
which is different.
what is
Retention,
RT?
tenure, and promotion, I'm sorry. That one and explicit, they're both related to retention.
Right,
So
okay,
they're
so
different
they're
than the other.
different, very good. All right, so here's what I've got. We have recommendations 1, 4, 5, 8, and 9. That's kind of one bag. We have recommendations 2 and 6 together. We have recommendations,
No,
it's
3
going
and
to,
6.
excuse me, 3 and 6. And 2 and 5. There we go. 1, 2, 3, and 3 and 6. So I will endeavor to put them together, so we're talking about maybe 3 or 4 recommendations coming out of the 9, because they're duplicative. All right? And Delorme will look forward to yours. You just email it, and please get it to me at least the Tuesday before our next meeting. All right, next is residential life. This is a long one, folks. And there are a total of 23, some of which are duplicative. And I, again, would appreciate maybe you all kind of calling out to me which ones you think are duplicative, and maybe they're not. I mean, we've got a lot of different ones here. And I also need to know, get a sense, do you think, no, let's not go forward with that, or, you know, whatever. So let's look at the first one. Ensure that RAs and residential life staff make frequent visits to theme suites to observe activities, displays in the common areas, ensure that they are trained to recognize controversial hate symbols and their potential to create a hostile environment for students. There are others in here like that, I know. And,
Question?
yes,
I'm wondering if you take out theme suites, it really should be across the board rather than just
Sure.
theme suites?
sure.
And then a lot of the others would be completely
Okay.
encompassed. in
All right, so if we take out visits to, what's the replacement?
Visits to dorm rooms and suites or whatever.
How about suites and, what do you all live in?
Rooms. Rooms, dorm rooms and suites.
So are there common areas where there are not suites? There are
Yeah,
also
you
common
have-
areas?
You do have common areas also?
Yes.
So if it was just
Okay.
visits to dorm rooms and suites?
Okay, and are all suites theme suites or not?
No.
They are not, okay. So visits to suites and you said dorm rooms?
Dorm rooms and suites to observe activities and displays in the common areas.
Got it.
Okay, let's back up for a second.
Sure.
Because the dorm room is the actual room where the students sleep,
Yes.
whereas the suites have common areas. So I
That's
think
what
that
I'm
is
talking
different.
about.
So unless you're talking about busting in everybody's room,
No, but dorm rooms, aren't there common areas like at the end of the hall? or
not in the
something?
dorm room. So I'm
Oh, you're
saying,
right.
we
Okay.
have to identify the,
Gotcha.
what she means is common areas in the dorm.
That's what I was asking.
and
So there are common
in
areas
suite, yeah.
in suites and there's common areas in dorms. I mean, we're not saying that every student's dorm, everybody should be going in there and looking at what they have on their walls. They have privacy, rights to privacy in their rooms.
So
Diane,
how about frequent visits to observe activities and displays in the common areas?
of
Just common
dorms and
areas?
suites,
Oh, okay,
right?
Yes.
all right.
Okay,
sure.
okay.
That works.
All right, of dorms. All right, and we'll see what others this covers as we move down. Number 2, increase the RA to student ratio. It's currently 1 to 50, and the recommendation is 2 to 50. Thoughts about that?
I don't know on what basis we picked that number. I mean, is
Oh,
there-
I will tell you, this is my recommendation, totally arbitrary. I knew I just felt there weren't enough. And so I didn't want to go crazy and say, 10 to 50, because I think that would be mission impossible. So that's why I picked that number.
I'd be interested in just, I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult to get some kind of national norms, because when I was an RA, I had about 50. And so I just don't know if 50 is considered a norm, too high, too low.
Okay, let me just put something out here why. If this is the norm, it isn't working here. That's why I made this. So it doesn't really bother me as to what the norm is. I know that based upon the fact-finding, that things happen. Observations were or were not made. And my view is one factor may be the ratio. So that's why I did this. Now, you might disagree. So that's why I want us to talk about this. Do you think this is, relevant or not? Go ahead, Bernadette. Then
I
Marcus.
certainly see it as relevant. This is one of a number of recommendations where it occurred to me that there are resource and perhaps other implications where before we definitively decided to include it, I would like to have more information about, what those ramifications might be.
So how do we get that information? We've already had housing people here, we've had Frosh. What else do we need to do?
We didn't ask
Linda?
that I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We
No.
didn't ask that question specifically of housing. I think we can probably ask that question offline and ask them to report back with some information.
Okay, Marcos and then Ellen.
I'm in line with your approach to this, feeling like we need to just take a stab at it. It's clear that what we have is not working. I also wanted to add to that, decreasing the ratio, is it decreasing or increasing the ratio of ARLCs and RLCs to RAs? Because if we remember, there's students, there's the RAs, there's the ARLCs, then there's the RLCs. And from some of the descriptions we had, the numbers varied significantly, apparently. but from some of the descriptions we had, there was some people who had a ton of ARLCs that they were accountable to, or a ton of RAs. So I feel like, I'm not sure what the number is either, because I think we need clarity on what those exact numbers. They told us a couple different things when they met with us.
Okay, so, but just, Ellen was next, and then I'll.
If I remember correctly, Stephanie, who visited us last time, said that 1 to 50 was the national norm, but that it used to be lower or higher.
Well, what was
It used to be like 1 to fewer number of students. And I'm assuming because of budget issues across the country that changed.
Okay, I'm a little troubled, let's see, I'm sorry, let me just make one comment. I'm a little troubled because when we took the time and had the housing folks here, residential life folks here, there were no RAs, and so, I mean, we could have asked that question. So I don't want to delay the work that we're doing. I mean, we said we really wanted this information. We got it. We learned what the ratios are. So I think it's going to be on us. We can certainly look at best practices, but I want to look at what happened here at San Jose State. And I just think something has to change. Either if it's not 2 to 50, it's 1 to 25. You know, that's what it would be, obviously. So let me go to Rick, and then first Michael, and then Rick. Mike had his hand up first.
Yeah, I just want to get a point of clarification. So in terms of the student ratio, it's 1 RA to 50 students, not 50 rooms.
No, I understand that.
Oh, no, I'm asking. That's
Yes.
me asking. I'm the one that knows
50
that.
students.
Okay.
It's 1 to 51 is what they said.
Okay.
1 to 51.
Then what I'd like to propose is somewhat of a compromise where we just kind of go, I would say 1 to 40, because what if I understand correctly, what we're talking about is basically one person is responsible for 25 rooms. So if you cut it down to 20 rooms, and I'll be honest, I hire students who work with students, and if you have however many hours and you're working there the whole time, being responsible for 20 rooms is not overly unreasonable. When you're looking at it as rooms.
Michael, rooms, is that 2 students per room? Is
Yes,
that what
2
you're saying?
students per
So you're
room.
talking 1 to 40.
Yeah, that's all.
Well, you know, again, I just put a number out there. We got discussion going. Anybody, Rick, do you have any observation on this one?
Well, I wanted to, and I heard what Michael just said in terms of the 1 to 40. I was going to speak in support of the 2 to 50 or 2 to 51, because I do have the 1 to 51 student ratio in terms of what was there. Obviously, what is there is not working. We know that there's a lack of supervision or a lack of ability to understand what's there. So if we have more brains and more minds that are looking at the problems, maybe we'll be able to address them. So I'm clearly in support of what would be basically the 2 to 51.
All right, I have a
ratio.
suggestion. None of us know what we're doing here on this one. So why don't we make the recommendation that ratio be changed? And again, I don't know if it's are we decreasing? Or we're decreasing.
No, you're increasing the ratio of RAs
to students, and we're decreasing the ratio of students to RA. So why don't we just make that recommendation and leave it to those who know to do that? But that is our recommendation, that ratio be increased.
That's fair.
But I think we don't really have, and I'll tell you, I'll be the first to say, I don't have the expertise in that area, but I know something needs to happen where there needs to be a better ratio.
And I would say to some degree I actually do. So I don't accept the notion that none of us know what we're talking about.
Well, no, I meant me.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, first you said we, so I'm sensitive.
Most
to
of
that.
us, how about that?
Okay. so
Most
I
of
just- I
us
just
don't
wanna
have
put-
that expertise, Michael.
I just want to put it out there.
I got you. All right, and I didn't mean to offend. Willie?
I don't know, just from my perspective, that it was a student to RA ratio that was behind this issue. I mean, to
don't
me, there are a
either.
lot of other things in here that I think would get more at that. And I'm just concerned about making a recommendation without information, and because we're going to have a lot of them. And if we think that's an issue, a recommendation that, that the university examine the current ratio of RAs to students compared to national norms and see if it should be adjusted, as opposed to providing a number when, as we've admitted, we don't have information on what that number should be.
Okay, just a quick response. Anytime you make a recommendation, it says, I recommend that the university or whatever body examine. That's just not, to me, that's not taking action. I mean, you can examine all you want, and you're like, okay, I examined it. And I don't know, like you said, so why don't we do this? Let's put a question mark. I don't want the university to consider anything. I want them to do something. But let me put a question mark on this one, and that means a hold, until we can, flesh it out a little more or not, okay?
Can we
Yes.
add the RLC and the
That's what I've done. I've put that in here, the ratios on those, okay?
I want to add to that as well, to not just examine across the different universities, but we have a pretty unique university in our diverse population. I'd like us to compare that to comparable universities with diversity.
Well, that's something, the university could do. That's not for us to do at this point, because we don't have the time to do that. But that's another reason why maybe we should, couch the language a little differently. But we'll wait. This is on hold now. All right? The next one, number 3, mandate follow-up by residential life staff within 24 hours within the involved students after incidents of bias/hate come to the attention of staff. The rationale for that was that the Moye Report clearly said there used to be a rule here at San Jose State for immediate follow-up within 24 to 48 hours, but then that rule went away. And I'm just saying, let's bring that rule back, but I don't like the 48 hours. I'd like 24 hours response. So it did. The university used to do that. I don't know why it went away.
I didn't think it had gone away. So
Well, according to the fact finder's report, it did. So that's his job. So anyway, yes, Maria.
I would think immediate follow-up. I mean, if somebody has been the target of a hate crime, I mean, get to it as soon as possible. I think you're saying the maximum is 24.
It's within 24 hours, right. But understand, we're not just talking hate crimes. That's a definition, a legal definition. I'm talking about just actions of bias-based misconduct. So that doesn't arise to the level of criminal behavior, right? So I want to make sure we cover it. So yes, that's within 24, so a max. It used to be at San Jose State, the max was 48 hours. And then that kind of all went away. There was no requirement. So I'd like for us to bring that back and get rid of the 48. So anyway, all right, so let's just keep moving on that. Ensure residential life staff who most frequently interact with students are aware of the racial identities of the students. Remember, this was a real tough one. I brought it up with the residential life people, and I sensed they were very defensive. We don't know what the race is. We don't, because the law says we can't know. But as I wrote in my rationale, you can eyeball students and get a sense of who's there on the floor. Well, there was this whole defensiveness, no, we don't do that. And again, for me, race is the elephant in the room. We never want to talk about it, but that's what this incident is all about and what got all this stuff going. And I feel strongly that residential life staff should be able to talk about that among staff, particularly if a black student is isolated, the only one in the suite. They should know about that, just to make them more alert. What's your sense about all this? Gary, and then Bernadette, and then Michael.
Well, I just wanted to say that in regards to the housing executives being defensive about adequately recording the ethnicities of the students that occupy housing, I feel like that's a very bad position to have, a defensive position in regards to that, because I just don't understand how you can serve the students if you don't actually know who's in your dorms. Like, if you don't know how many black students actually live in housing, how can San Jose State adequately respond to their needs if you don't even know how many are in the building? So I just wanted to say that.
Got it. Bernadette?
A concern here is that there are students who declined to state, and they have the right to do that. And to put a RA or a staff person in the position of guessing is, I think, a little bit concerning to me.
Okay.
So somehow I think that needs to be taken into consideration.
Sure. And was it Michael?
I like the spirit of this, so I'll say it that way. And maybe this just comes in the category of flush it out, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is what we're trying to say is you fundamentally just need to be aware of who's there. Now, you might not know it with exact precision, and you might not memorize it, but I've served a little time as an RN, and I knew who my people were on a basic fundamental level. So I like the spirit of this. Maybe we can play with some language, but I don't think that people should not know fundamentally who they're responsible for.
And by the way, this recommendation doesn't say people have to self-identify. It just says eyeball people and know who's on your floor. All right. Over here, Linda, and then we'll go to Chris.
To some degree, I'm echoing Bernadette's concern and also Michael. My biggest concern when I try to put myself in the position of the RA is that students do have different feelings about the self-identification. And if you're asking the RA, I think it depends on what you're asking them to do. if you're asking them to be aware of who their people are, that's absolutely great. If you're asking them to label people in some way and report that, that's a different issue. So
Okay.
that's the part I'm concerned about.
All right, Chris?
Excuse me, yeah, my concerns are similar. What I would like to propose, though, is to have maybe something about being aware of the racial identities of the residents in aggregate, because you may be able to get data that's kind of reported in aggregate form without necessarily requiring that everybody be agreeing at that moment, in the moment that something's happening, to self-identify. And the reason I think it's problematic, though, to have, I understand and I appreciate your sentiment that sometimes you just need to be aware of who's around you, but there are some people with identities that are easily mistaken for someone or something
Yes,
else. And I
absolutely.
think that that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, because we also don't want to, re-offend somebody who's just been the victim of an incident by improperly categorizing them and by making assumptions. about who
Okay,
they are.
so to save time, this was my recommendation. Let me reword it and bring it back to you all. Okay? All right. Next up, require residential life staff to carefully scrutinize and discuss student agreements shortly after the agreements are signed, and to immediately follow up with students if staff have any questions or need clarifications. And, that was just based on the information that came before us. Anybody? Everybody?
Number 9 also.
Linked to 9, okay, let me just, is everybody okay with 5?
Yeah.
You right? We want to, yes, Willie?
I support 5, but
I just wanted to mention that we can look at the two of them together.
Yes, I'm gonna go down to it in a second. Willie?
And I guess my question is not if they just had questions or clarification, but if something just seemed unusual. Because that's what struck me about the statement about the bicycle lack of shame, that just seemed unusual. So I'm trying to find a way of, and immediately follow up with students if staff have any questions or need clarification, or if something appears unusual.
Okay.
I mean, just
Or,
using their judgment.
which is why it's so important they have sensitivities to all this stuff, okay. Something, okay, I'll come up with better wording on that. And then go skip down then to number 9. It says a better review of the roommate suite mate contracts, a review of the contracts on a higher level before being put away for filing. Gabriella?
Yeah, so since that one ties in with the one that you had recommended, 9 was mine, we can go ahead and just add the wording of, higher level than RAs into the recommendation that
So
you made.
when do you want them routinely reviewed by
After
their
contracts are-
supervisors? Yes, that's what I'm saying.
right.
So if I add the word routinely reviewed by the next level, the higher level?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So we're going to combine, and I'll work on the language of getting them together. That would be number 9 and number 5. All right, number 6, ensure that all residential life staff trainings include explicit discussions about racial prejudice, race hate symbols, and about how to create an environment in which students will speak up without fear of retribution. And you notice the student was afraid to speak up because he thought it would only get worse. And then there were students who knew, who said, we won't talk, because the student asked them not to talk, and they didn't, and then the abuse continued. Any, okay, all right, let's keep moving. Number 7, schedule monthly and mandatory check-ins with suite mates in group settings and on an individual basis when necessary, and invite graduate students from the School of Social Work and from the Department of Psychology here at State to observe the check-ins for the purpose of providing feedback to residential life staff about group process and how to encourage full and honest participation by students in the meetings. Anyway, this is just ideas that were floating around when I was thinking about how to do this. Michael?
I want to say I definitely agree with the notion of the check-ins. I just had a question about, I'm not sure about the School of Social Work and the Department of Psychology, but I do think especially, and I'm going to make the assumption that when the smoke clears, we will decrease the ratio of students. So that does not seem, in the context of the decreased ratio, unreasonable. To have
That meaning
frequent
the check-ins.
The check-ins, both on an individual basis as well as, so I do want to say
Right.
that piece.
Yeah. With regard to social work and Department of Psychology, there are students, graduate students here, and they do their clinical work by, training to be therapists, psychologists, and my partner happens to be a clinical psychologist who suggested that if these students were to sit in, they could also help in training, helping RAs, whoever works on residential life, better ask questions and understand answers being given. They're not there as therapists, but that's what they're training to do. So I'm trying to figure out a way the university could use its resources, who are graduate students here. Linda?
As a faculty member in the Department of Psychology, I think I can address how that perhaps would work. Our clinical program has been on hiatus, so we actually do not have those students just yet, but we are starting up again in the fall. And so I'm wondering if it would be useful to put that in as such as using, where appropriate students, for example, we don't have a clinical program, but we have industrial organizational psychology graduate students who address process, group process, decision-making, things like that. So there may be multiple places, so it would be more of a such as rather than a mandate.
Yeah, this isn't a mandate, okay, so I have invite, but we could come up with something, so you want the word
Yeah, no, I think it's a great
consider?
idea.
I'm like,
I'm
we could-
concerned somewhat about the practical parts of it.
Yes, but you like the concept?
Absolutely, yes.
Good. Okay, Maria, Chris, and then Willie.
I would recommend students from sociology because they're the students who are trained to look at interaction. They're trained in looking at issues of race, class, and gender.
Are they graduates or undergraduates?
There are graduate students.
So
from
I'm only talking
sociology.
graduate students here?
Yes.
Okay, I do
Yes,
not
yes.
want undergraduates, okay. So you want to add the School of, no, what's it? Department of Sociology.
Sociology and interdisciplinary social sciences.
Say it again, please.
Sociology and interdisciplinary social sciences. Sorry.
Social sciences, and these would be graduate students. I'm going to change the language, I'll work on that. Yes, now who's next, Chris?
Well, I'm in the sociology and interdisciplinary social science department, and it's a mouthful because it's a new name for our department. I agree with our graduate students, but there are also graduate students in counselor education. So I think it would be good to word it maybe in ways that let it be a little bit inclusive, because there are other departments that could be
Okay,
included.
let me work on the wording on that, okay, but the concept seems to be okay. Willie?
I
Or
don't
not.
agree with the concept. Maybe it's me, but I'm thinking about the life of a student in the dormitory. I think having monthly meetings in the dormitory with outside observers changes the experience of being a student in the dorm. I understand the issue you're trying to get at, and I like the idea of, having the staff engage more and check in with the students, or the higher level staff check in with the students. But having monthly, it almost, I know it's not a therapy session, but if you got sociologists and psychologists sitting there observing, in my mind, it changes the fundamental nature of being in a dormitory.
Okay, other comments? Michael?
It's slightly different, but if we were to go forward with this, I would like to specify that these are not necessarily first-year grad students. Because I'll be quite honest with you, I've seen some of the grad students their first year, and given the training that we expect of the RAs, a lot of them aren't there. So just to have them there as a shadow, there's going to be an intimidation factor just by the fact they're a grad student, and there's an implication that they have some answer that they may not have. So again, I like the idea of the check-in. I really, really, really do. But I think we just need to be careful about this can of worms, the different worms that are in it. And we might just need to change some language, but I also agree with what Willie's saying about the experience. But there's got to be a happy medium.
Okay.
Because I think the expertise, there is some help there.
Yeah, so let's think about it a little more.
Coach Wright.
Wayne? Coach Wright?
I kind of agree with Willie a little bit in terms of the time restraint that's going to, be required for all of this stuff. Speaking, especially from athletics, there's stuff in places that the students, some of them work, et cetera. So I think we should be sensitive to how long this is going to take, on a monthly basis, et cetera.
Okay, all right. Gabriella?
Yes, I just want to make sure the check-ins are, it would be the RAs conducting them? Yes, okay. So yeah, just to include language stronger than to just consider, because I think that would just be important.
Sure.
And it ties in with my recommendation 10, so if you would just want to drop 10,
right.
that's fine, because.
No, we'll put it together. That's why I'm
Okay.
just going to link them up. And just as an observation on this other language about using other resources at the university, I do respectfully disagree with you, Willie. I don't think that they will cast a pall on the students. I think that if the same graduate student or students are there, they get to know those students. Excuse me. But I'm going to defer to the wisdom of those who are in the field, and they seem to be interested in kind of pursuing this. I understand no first years, and so I've written that stuff down too. Ellen?
I would add, in addition to not first years, that I'm assuming that they'll be supervised because this is very highly advanced skill of observing and giving feedback on group process,
Well,
especially
Yeah,
sensitive.
I thought about that, but the supervising is required if they're there for counseling and therapy. They're just going to sit and observe and talk about feedback. So, Linda?
I can tell you that in our, I can't speak for other programs, but in our programs, anytime a student has a direct contact, a student in training has a direct contact, we have a legal obligation to be supervising
Okay.
that student.
All right, so that's at least 2 people then supervising, at least from the Department of Psychology, anyway. Yes, Michael?
And therein lies the can of worms.
Yep.
Because I understand what's in this can of worms once you open it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what starts coming out. And before you know it, there's 5 more people in the room. And I
Right.
think this is where Willie's getting at.
All right,
It-
so let me
Supervision
do,
doesn't mean they have to be present, sorry.
excuse me?
Supervision does not mean they have to be present.
Oh,
But-
okay, all right.
But when you multiply this across
No,
the
I
different,
understand.
yeah, that's the can of worms.
No, there is no can of worms as far, if the supervisor doesn't have to be right there in the room. That's what I'm saying. They're not giving therapy and advice. They're just watching, observing, and then quietly talking later to RAs about maybe different ways of doing process or getting feedback. So, anyway, let's just move on, all right? I understand your concerns, and let's move on. So we've hooked up number 7 and number 10. 8, require all students who reside in resident halls to participate in diversity program in which race is explicitly discussed. All right, moving on. Yes, Willie?
You know, given the report that we read, I think that if we're going to have a program like this, I think race, you know, gender and other lifestyle issues are explicitly discussed.
Right, this isn't to the exclusion of others.
I know,
I
just
just
figured-
remember there was a hypotheticals in some kind of programming, and there was nothing about race.
It was the only thing that
It wasn't mentioned. So that's why I want to make sure. So this is, and I'll make sure, Willie, I'll add that not to the exclusion of other, okay, other groups. Okay, number 11, housing administration and staff members should find a way to verbally communicate main points that exist in the housing contract, which includes the responsibility of a resident. I'm not sure, Gabriella, what you meant by that.
This was just because it was brought up in the last meeting about how students, for example, in this case, that the student told his friend not to say anything, just to kind of communicate the importance of addressing these kind of issues to either RAs or a higher administration, you know, let the residents know that they have the obligation to do that.
Okay, but that's not in the housing contract, right? This was students who just said, we know what's going on, and he told us not to say anything, so we're not going to say anything.
Oh,
So
okay.
how do we,
I thought the board that came in last time had said that in the contract it addresses the obligation of the residents, but if not. then-
right, but I'm not sure where we're going with that. So you're saying verbally communicate, I'm trying to.
Just because
But
they wouldn't, I mean, I would say a lot of students don't read the housing contract,
So
and
s-
just to highlight main points.
Got it. So you
Yes.
want, there should be sessions where the housing contracts are reviewed
Yes.
specifically by housing staff with the
During
students?
Correct.
Got you, okay.
Could be connected to 5 and 9 then?
So,
Does that make sense, where they're reviewing the agreement?
No, the agreements come later.
Agreements are
The housing
different.
contract would be right at the very beginning.
so a housing contract's a little different, then we have the agreements,
Yes, they are.
I
okay?
understand the order. I just was thinking about the intent that Gabriella's talking about. Is
Yes,
finding a way outside of when I first signed the contract to reinforce what those agreements are in person, verbally.
I got it. I think what I'll do is keep it separate for now, because I get it, I get what you're saying, and I'll work with it. Number 12, all residential advisors should be at least a junior. RAs should not be freshmen or sophomore, but juniors. What are they now?
The youngest you can be is a sophomore.
As a sophomore. So there are sophomore RAs. The recommendation is no sophomores, they have to start as juniors. Feedback. Okay, we'll go on, let's see, I've been going on this side. We'll go Linda, and then we'll go over here. Who over here wants feedback? Anybody? All right, Linda, and then Willie.
The concern I would have is that a lot of the juniors are transfer students. It's a practical concern. And it would be very hard to recruit and train someone for the junior year if they're not even on campus yet. So that, I don't know what that would mean in terms of the pool of possible people. The other concern I would have is that I think, although it's not exclusive to people who have lived in the dorms, I don't believe. Okay. It certainly is desirable to have as many people who have actually had the dorm experience be an RA. And so having
Which
a
would mean
junior.
sophomores.
Yeah, so sophomores, I think, including sophomores who are mature, who meet the whatever, I don't think we should be arbitrary about the class level of the
Okay, I want
student.
to ask the students. Peter, Gabrielle.
Yeah, I was going to chime in too that I think when you look at people that are applying for RAs as juniors, they apply their sophomore year. So I think it is really important to get that piece in, that they've had that dorm experience and they understand what the culture is. Because I think a lot of what this comes down to is really understanding how the housing culture works. So I think that is more valuable than age is their experience in the dorms. I agree.
So your sense is that you think that it shouldn't be
Yeah.
restricted just to juniors?
I think the language should specify more their experience in the dorms as opposed to their experience in terms of class level.
Okay,
'Cause-
and so I understand, if you want to be an RA, the soon as you can apply to be one is when?
Sophomore year.
So you are a sophomore?
You can apply as a
So
freshman.
how can you
You
do
can
that
apply
and be
as
a
a
sophomore?
freshman.
But you
Right.
So you
apply
can
the
apply
year
as a
before.
freshman.
Yeah, so if you're going to be an RA in the fall of the next year, you apply
Yes.
in the spring of the.
So with this recommendation, you would apply as a sophomore
With
to be
this-
an RA, I've said with this.
This particular one,
As a
yeah.
junior, okay? That's what we're saying. You're saying, all right. So Linda, you're saying that there are people that transfer in their junior year, right? But they wouldn't be able to do this because they weren't sophomores here residing in the dorm, so that wouldn't apply,
Okay, you're,
Right?
yes, that is right.
right? Okay, so.
Okay, but I think I'm also. well,
I'll come
sort
back
of.
to you. Well, we'll talk more. We'll talk more. I'm just trying to get some clarity on this, so yeah. So Ellen, Willie, you were next.
You know, like all jobs for students, it's a form of financial aid, and I wouldn't want to restrict sophomores from having an opportunity for that. I know lots of mature sophomores, lots of immature freshmen, seniors,
Yeah.
and I think having a year in the dormitory, I think you're right. You have to have experience in dorm culture, which a sophomore could get as a freshman. So I would leave it as is and allow sophomores to be RAs.
Do we know how many RAs currently are sophomores versus, or now juniors or seniors? See, we didn't have any RAs, so we didn't have that. Well, we didn't know to ask either. I wasn't thinking about it. So I don't know. Because if it's a very small number that are sophomores now, and there are many more juniors, then that recommendation might be one we want to consider. If there are a lot more sophomores, a substantial number, then we're going to be excluding a number of people, and that might fly against adopting a recommendation. But that's information we don't have. Yes?
The other thing I want to keep in mind is whoever gets these jobs, it's not like they're not beating people out in a competition. So the bottom line is there's some kind of competition that they do go through. And so you don't want to limit the sophomore who, however they rate it, however they go through it, who beats out the junior or the senior or what have you. So I think that's important. Plus, and again, I'm going to go off the assumption that we're going to reduce the ratio. There's going to be some more training. So a lot of things that I might not have been comfortable with in abstract, once the recommendations come out and I can see how it's going to play itself out, I become comfortable.
Okay.
So I'd say I wouldn't want to limit
Okay,
this to
I got it.
sophomore
Chris?
year.
Yeah, I was going to say something kind of similar. First of all, one of the problems that we don't have the data on, but I just wonder how much the pool actually goes down the higher you go in class rank, because so many more students move off campus when they're juniors and seniors, when they're 20, 21 years old and are not really interested in living in the dorms anymore. So it may be limiting the pool. I think, though, with some of the other recommendations that we have for a greater level of report to higher level folks, RLCs and then to administrators, I think I'm inclined to think that may, help to get what we're trying to get at, which is having a greater level of supervision, a greater level of maturity in the RAs that we select. So I just don't necessarily think it's
Okay,
required to eliminate
let's
sophomores.
take two more comments, then we're going to decide if we're going to leave this one or not. Just two more comments, and that's it. Okay, Ellen, and then
I
Peter.
have a couple of quick ones. So I've lived in the res halls a couple of years, a few years ago when I was in college, and I've had sophomore RAs, and they were wonderful. So I agree that it depends on the maturity level. If I remember correctly, one of the criteria for this is not necessarily that they have lived in housing before, but they actually lived in, I think the wording was something like common interest houses, so not necessarily res hall, but that one of the criteria is that they have had that experience.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, just a really fast, I guess, point of information. So I'm not sure how this would affect the timeline of this recommendation, but I know for a fact that there are RAs that find out if they got hired. I think this weekend is when are releasing information. So if we're interested in finding that information in terms of the ages of the RAs that are hired for next year,
The levels, the years they're here.
yeah, that is
sophomores are-
information that would be available, I think,
Gotcha.
soon. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take one quick one. Gary?
Yeah, I don't know how much time we're going to be spending on this
We're
recommendation,
going to spend 30 more seconds. Go
right.
ahead.
Well, funny. I think that we should have clarification on the rationale behind this recommendation, because if what we're trying to achieve is someone who can better respond to a racial discrimination issue, is that something that comes with age? Is that something that comes with the actual education they're receiving on campus, or is that or does that just mean that the university or the RAs housing needs to properly train RAs on how to respond to racial discrimination?
Okay.
hate
No, I think you
crimes?
make a good point that, I assume the rationale was maturity, and then I hear, excuse me, Ellen saying there were sophomores who were superb doing this. So I don't want to spend any more time on this either. We just let it go and say, thumbs down on this one. And if you want, we can just, bring it back, and I can get the information, how many of the new ones are sophomores. Peter, I'm going to have to task you with that. How many are sophomores, how many are juniors? Do you want to let this one go, let it go by the wayside, or what? We're moving on regardless.
Thumbs down.
Consensus, thumbs down, consensus? How many people, just raise your hand, how many people like to move on and not, in other words, reject this one? Okay, how many hands are up? How many hands are, come on. Okay, that's the majority. We're moving on. Okay,
Can I
thank
just
you.
ask that maybe Delorme,
Let's
if
keep
she
going.
wants to?
This one's out.
No,
We're
no, no,
moving.
if she wants to think about the qualifications of RAs,
We're-
look at that.
Sure, but we're moving on from that one. That one's out, okay? Number 13, residential advisors should reflect the diversity of the campus. Comments? Let's go.
I would just go, to the extent that's possible.
Having done training with
That's
the
not the
RA.
recommendation, but go ahead.
Having
Ellen.
done training with the RA group here, and again, this is a very visible, my guess of what's in the room, it was pretty diverse.
Coach Wright?
I'm
So
sorry, I need to have that repeated.
She said that the group that she saw was very diverse when she looked at the residential
Of
advisors.
RAs.
So here's the recommendation. Listen to the words. Residential advisors should reflect the diversity. This is not must. It isn't may. It says should. So what do you make of that? I mean, do you feel that's too strong? Do you want to not go there? Is it strong enough? Do you want it stronger or not at all? Peter?
So I guess this is kind of a point of clarification for the recommendation. So in terms of the recruitment process or the hiring process for the RAs, maybe how would this be implemented? Will we look at the numbers, the percentages on campus?
It's a good
or-
point, because the folks that were here who talked to us says, we never look at race, we can't use race, and I actually disagree. It can be a factor, you can look at it, but you don't base your decision on the person's race. I understand that. So there was that pushback I felt, so I guess, I don't know, this means, the law says you cannot solely based on race say, okay, you're an RA. But the law in California, I believe, is such that it can be a factor among many that you look at in trying to get diversity. So, Delorme, I mean, I don't know if that's, what your intent was.
That's the spirit that I offered it in.
All right. So, Chris Gary.
Yeah, in terms of the law, you might not be able to explicitly say, you're going to use race as the factor to hire somebody, but you definitely can use, you can definitely say that in the attempt to recruit a pool of potential residential advisors to hire, that you can recruit with, with diversity in mind. And so maybe there's a way to kind of tweak the language of this to say that, and I agree with what Ellen is saying. I totally hear that it has been diverse, and I appreciate that fact, and I don't want to take anything away from that. But I think it can be helpful to have something to say, just an overt statement to say that in the process of selecting residential advisors, there's an effort to make sure that it reflects, that the pool reflects the diversity of the campus.
I think that's her recommendation. I mean, it says should reflect diversity,
So then
period.
what I'm saying is maybe that the language
So-
of how it's written should be changed to
How?
just be a little more clear.
I don't know how much clearer, go ahead. Yes, please.
So having had HR experience and as a former recruiter as well in my other life, I would suggest maybe wording it to, and maybe they already do this actually in the recruitment and selection, that one of the interviews or one of the criteria is that the RA applicants need to talk about experience or their own sort of background that shows their awareness or their sensitivity to diverse issues, so
slippery
that could
slope.
be part of the criteria.
Hold on.
This is a slippery
Delorme?
slope. I really did say what I meant, and I think the whole intention is that we should focus on the should.
Use the microphone, please.
We should really be focusing on the should. It's a slippery slope when we start adding all these other criteria that we want to look at in terms of trying to get to this goal. And I think we should just be focusing on should.
All right, Linda?
I actually agree with that because it isn't a mandate. I think a mandate would be very difficult, but I think it is very important for this task force to convey a very clear message that this is something that we highly value and want to see efforts made as effectively as possible.
Okay, we've spent enough time on this. Let's move on. Is this, everybody's on board? All right, let's keep moving on. Residential advisors should have access to.
Was that a vote? Everybody's on?
Yeah, well, everybody's on board.
Okay.
I'm going by consensus here.
Good.
A residential advisor should have access to all spaces deemed student housing for the purpose of promoting student safety, engaging in necessary follow-up, to conduct investigation. All spaces. What do you mean by that, Delorme? This is her recommendation. What are all spaces?
The sense that I got when the incident happened was that the RAs seemed to be uncomfortable about going into the intimate spaces of the residents, when if they had felt comfortable in going into those spaces, they might have discovered something where they could have intervened and it wouldn't have gotten worse.
Other observations? Peter?
So from my understanding, RAs do have access to all residential spaces, so I'm wondering, is this recommendation more about having them feel comfortable entering? Because I know they have physical access. They can scan into any dorm room or key into any specific living space. So maybe in the spirit of this recommendation, is it more about allowing RAs to feel more comfortable entering these spaces? Or maybe I'm not sure how that would be.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Allowing them to become, I mean, what
Yeah.
does that mean? If
That's
we're
my
making a
question.
recommendation, so what I'm trying to understand, are you saying their rooms, their private rooms? So, I mean, students have a right to privacy, and you're saying RAs have access. They can go in those rooms. But, I mean, I
But
don't,
they have to have reason to go.
yeah, I don't
Right.
want these students to be living in an environment where an RA just come popping in because they, you know, comfortable in your space. I mean, no. So, I have a,
Legitimate,
pardon?
legitimate.
Well, but I don't know how, I mean, you recommend that they have comfort. I mean, this is part of training.
Yeah.
And I'm not, so in other words, my sense, this is one of those that's getting a little fuzzy for me. I want some concrete stuff. So they do have access to these private spaces. They do. Now, we get back to training, we get back to sensitivity, we get to diversity and, you know, being aware that problems may exist. That's a whole nother ballgame. So I kind of see that coming out of a good, strong RA program where they're comfortable, you know, going into those spaces, but they do have access. That, again, just my observation. Gary?
I think if we're talking about RAs being comfortable, it's clear that RAs do have access to individual rooms. I think the issue is what do they feel comfortable doing once they're actually inside the room. I'm pretty sure if they see alcohol or something like that or illegal substance, they will probably confiscate it. What happens if they see a Confederate flag in the room? Are they allowed to take it down? Are they allowed to tell the students to take it down? I think if we're talking about comfort, like what is are comfortable or allowed to do or has the authority to do once he or she is in the room?
Well, that's a factual question. You know, what does the RA have authority to do if they go in and see a hate symbol? That's that student's private space. And if it's not up in a window, you know, there's still the First Amendment says free speech. You know, I don't think an RA has a right to go in there and tear down anything. Now, they might want to have a discussion with the person and say, you know, are we cool? You know, what's with the swastika? But I just don't believe that an RA can go in and that's your right.
Yeah.
If you want to have that, that's your right. My view, looking at time, I vote no on this one, meaning I think we can cover this
I agree.
with all the other recommendations about RA training. So
I agree.
where are we on this? Let's just do a hands up if you want to,
To not have it.
hands up for a thumbs down. if you know what I mean. Okay, so we'll move on that one. Okay, I understand the sentiment delivered, and I believe we'll subsume. Number 15, residential advisors should receive training from a competent consultant on the history of race in America, ethnic relations, gender relations, cross-cultural relations involving sexual orientation, religion, veteran status, disability, and income equity. Willie?
And we talk about having training early, so it's somewhat redundant, but also, I think they have faculty on campus who would be competent in this kind of training. I'm not just sure if you say a competent consultant and plus.
The faculty could be good.
And indeed, this raises this other issue about bringing in the resources that are here at this university, go outside the bubble, but within the campus, and bring in people who can do this. And so anyway, I think this is a good recommendation, competent consultant, but I think we'd add, in parentheses, campus, university
Faculty,
experts, something like that, so they tap them. There are people here. Okay. We are all right on this one? Let's move on. Okay. 16, policies and procedures specific to screening students for placement in housing should be enhanced to higher best practice standards that avoid isolation of ethnic minorities, etc. I'm not sure what this means.
Well, when they were describing it, it was more like a lottery process that takes place.
It's random.
with Random selection takes place.
Yep.
And I would just like to see some layer of screening that's added to this process so that we don't look up and see students isolated like this student was. That should have been picked up on early.
Comments? Okay, over here. Rick?
Well, addressing this and kind of tying it into mine, which is number 23, maybe we can knock off one at the same time. That's what I was trying to say. There should be some kind of a process for a roommate matching, as well as roommates saying that we don't want to be matched with these kind of folks. So if you have folks that say that I do not want to live with an African American, they shouldn't be forced to live with an African American or such, and they can have elsewhere. But how do they have a roommate matching policy so people can then say, here are the kind of things that I want to include in my housing? So I don't know if that's what you're getting at, Delorme, but that's exactly.
First of all, I just wonder how many students are going to write, I don't want to be with any black person. Or I don't think that's going to be explicit. But what I understand is there's random selection, and then they're given a time to opt out and relocate. Gary, and I need to hear from students on this. Gary? And other students.
My
Peter?
concern about this one is is also related to my concern about, even though we dropped it, about having RAs directly reflect the diversity of the campus.
We did not drop that.
Oh, we didn't?
No.
Cool.
It's right there.
But my concern about that one was, the task force should be aware that if, it's a direct mirror reflection, then it's probably only going to be like 2 RAs, well, 2 black RAs if you have a direct mirror reflection of the overall campus population. So,
What's your view on 16? I'm trying to understand.
So my view on 16 is essentially that so if there's only going to be 2 black RAs, how are we going to ensure that those that black students have access to those black RAs that come into contact with them? The same thing, it's related to my agreement with this is we need to make sure that students have access to other students that are like them, identity-wise, ethnicity, color, nationality.
Okay.
So
All
I'm
right.
in support of this, is what I'm saying.
Peter?
So yeah, I just want to directly maybe respond to that comment. So I'm kind of wondering where we're getting the only 2 black RA number from, because I don't think we specified any specific correlation to the campus diversity. I think, are you referring to the one that said it should reflect the diversity of campus?
I was stating with African American students being 3% of the campus, if we had the number of RAs directly reflect the number of African American students, we'd probably only have 2 black RAs. And
He was giving a hypothetical.
yes.
Just basically on this.
Okay.
So we're pretty much saying, I was agreeing that we should have a word change and focus on the should reflect the diversity into that particular one.
Okay, but the issue here is really what she's bringing up, is this whole avoiding a person being isolated. But
Yeah.
there are people of color who elect to be isolated. I mean, you can't force.
Yeah.
So I want us to be very careful. I mean, there are people who have very different views about their own ethnicity and race and what how they want to relate There are some black folks who only want to be around white folks. There are some black folks who only want to be around black Latinos. So we can't, that's not our purview, you know? So I understand we said, the fact finder said this student was the only black student in the suite. He may have wanted that. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't work out well. But I don't know. So I don't know that
He
we
picked his own
can
roommate.
do more. Yeah, and one was, yeah, he knew one of them. So I don't want us, so, I mean, right now, housing has a random selection process. And then you can opt out and, you know, change things around. What is it,
Right.
2 weeks or something?
You-
And
you
I
ha-
don't know that we ought to muck
I
around
think
with
that's
that.
important to know, and a good reminder, the students for don't have to have any reason. They can just say, this doesn't work for me, I want a different roommate, and I can move. And then later in the semester, they have another option to do that, but there must be cause. Okay, so there are options built in for students. I think that's important.
All right, what do we want to do on this one?
Drop it.
You know, I still want to address this because I'm not attacking the opt-out process. That could still be there. But what I'm trying to say is how do people opt into what they want? So if you have a situation where an African-American only wants to be with white roommates, they can do so, but you can be able to select the kind of roommates that you have so that you can go into a pool of things that you think it might work. And then if you don't like it, you can opt out. But in terms of the situation the recommendation that I have, and I believe Delorme is making, is that there should be at least a selection process which allows people to say, if you match me with roommates that are alike in this fashion so that they can be comfortable with where they're going.
I can tell you the lawsuit's coming down the pike.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, if the university decides to adopt a policy like that, okay. That's
wouldn't
fine.
support
So,
that.
Michael, very quick, and then we're moving on. Okay.
I also want to remind everybody that the university did have the matching policy. They moved to this because they weren't getting what you were hoping to get if you get one. So this didn't fall out the sky. We did try it that way. We weren't successful, so they went to this. So I don't want to pretend like that didn't happen.
Number 16, what do you want to do? Thumbs up or down? Down. Okay, we're going to move on that one. We'll take that one out. 17, individual meetings between students and housing staff should take place within the first few weeks of each semester to identify issues and concerns that may not be revealed in group settings or via formal reporting processes. So we had the monthly check-ins, but you're saying this is a little different.
Yeah.
Say that again?
Mine was more flexible, more of a matching to the one that you proposed, but mine was more flexible, not being specific about monthly.
Yeah, so mine was a minimum of monthly meetings. So there could be more, and so could we put this with
Yeah,
that
they could-
first
yeah,
one?
they could match.
And that would be, okay, somebody tell me where that number, yeah, one. I'll fit it in, one of those, Delorme, is that okay? And put that in with, I'll put number one here. 18, interview tools that are patterned after best practices should be developed for use by housing staff.
Interview about what?
Yeah.
Interview tools. I mean, these are
Interview-
skills, you know,
Interview skills.
you know, your skills. How do you talk to students? How do you interview? How do you really find out what's going on? That's why I said our graduate students, psychology, sociology, can help inform that process so that these students, undergraduates, understand how to get that information out, right? So that's part of,
Yes,
and
part
I
of
like that
training.
could be part of, which one? What should it go under? Right now, I'm going to put it, this was number
Maybe 6, yeah.
and,
Frank, I thought I heard
is that
you say they
okay?
do that.
Let's just try that. Let's put it with 6 and see how that works. And I'm going to put interview skills, is that all right, instead of tools? Delorme? Number 6, is that what we said?
Yeah.
Okay. 19, special interest suites or floors should be geared toward promoting diversity, appreciation, and cross-cultural exchange. Gary?
I like it. It definitely resonates with what I was stating earlier about
Okay.
students needing access to people like them,
All
and
right.
especially if you're just promoting diversity. You know, it's optional.
Okay.
You know, I definitely like it. I definitely like the way it's
All
written.
right.
I think we
Peter?
should move it.
I definitely do think there should be some sort of diversity piece put into the special interest floors and the suites. But I do remember asking quite a few questions about the specific theme floors in CVC to the housing staff, and they did say that there had to be a need base first. So I think if we are making this as a recommendation, we need to assess some sort of need base, or will there be students interested in being a part of these special interest floors?
So
'Cause the
there
pro-
are, so there may
Can't
be a,
impose them.
say that again.
You can't impose them. There
Right.
has to be needs-based, so somebody has.
Yeah.
So what,
Because the floors that exist now are there because students came to the.
I
housing, so we
get that,
need
but so
somebody-
let's say you have engineering students.
Mhm.
And so if engineering students don't have a need to learn about appreciating diversity and cross-culture, then they don't get that.
No, that's not.
So what are we saying?
No, that's not, yeah.
I'm not understanding that.
Okay, I think what he's saying is that engineering students do have a theme. Right now, themes are around disciplines. So if you want, typically, the theme floor is around disciplines. If you want to have theme floors around cultural issues, racial diversity, whatever, the students should be petitioning for it, which we can help them do. And in fact, I had a conversation with several students, I don't know if they're here, this past week, and they were describing how they would envision that. And frankly, I thought it sounded very rich.
So this is
It'd be very
student,
rich
you're saying
experience.
it's student-initiated
Yeah.
within the
We've already
themes.
initiated that.
Right.
Students, we
So-
already have expressed our need and our interest in getting that done. We've been doing
Okay,
that since
so,
spring 13.
but what's the recommendation then?
So
Is-
I think when I'm looking at this, I'm just wanting to ensure that somehow we include students in on this recommendation, so that we make sure that there are students that, before we go ahead and make this proposal, that there are students behind it as well. And I'm all for this proposal. I just want to make sure
Okay,
that we
but I'm
involve
trying to,
students.
okay, let's look at it again. Special interest suites or floors should be geared toward promoting diversity appreciation. But I'm hearing that any kind of programming like that comes from the students, it's initiated by them. So how can, I don't understand how we can make this recommendation. Yes, Michael
Okay.
and then Chris.
One thing I want to say is one of the things we're doing is making a recommendation. And part of the nature of recommendations is we're bucking the system and going against the status quo. So I don't think we need to be bound by the way your university does things. There's no reason why the floor couldn't be established and the students have it as an option, because the students didn't establish the academic themed dorms.
Okay.
That wasn't student
All
driven.
right, I got you. So what if the language were like this? Encourage students in special interests and suite floors, and this would be RAs, whoever, to have programs promoting diversity appreciation. Somebody from externally is encouraging them to do that, and then they can create their programming. But if nobody's bringing it to their attention and they're clueless, they're not going to do it.
But see, I think the concern I have about that wording is that it's identifying special interest floors as being targeted, when I think it should be the entire housing. I don't think it should be
That's fine.
specific just to these special groups.
Okay.
It should be everybody.
So what about, again, wording, encourage students in residential, in dorms and suites, to have programs promoting diversity,
Absolutely.
something like
Yeah.
that?
Across the board.
Across the board.
I just want to say once again that in regards to student initiative, the university administration knows that students have asked for this. President Mohammad Qayoumi knows. Provost Andy Feinstein knows. Dorothy Poole, Chief of Staff, knows that students have asked for diversity-themed floors in addition to other things. We have asked for this since spring 2013, so.
But this isn't for diversity theme floors. This is
separate.
for whatever,
19 and 20 are two different things.
yeah,
Yeah.
so 19 is what we're on, and that's just where there are theme floors,
That they have diversity.
that they be encouraged to have diversity programming. This isn't about,
Everywhere in the dorm.
yeah,
Doesn't
this
matter
is, this
whether
is
the themes
dorms
or
and
not.
suites,
Yeah, yes.
okay?
Okay, it
All
sounds
right.
awfully similar.
All right, okay? All right, moving on. That one's in. Okay, 20, ethnicity, culturally based theme floors in campus housing.
What Gary's referring to.
All right, so but there's not a thing there. Does it means have them, create, what is that? What's the
I
verb?
think something got caught up there. At
No, I
least
just
hope so.
cut and pasted, so,
Oh, sorry.
That's all
Okay,
right. So what's the
that's
word
my
you want?
wording. To work with students to develop ethnicity, culturally based theme floors, I'm open to the wording on that, in campus housing, but I think definitely it should be there, work with students,
Yeah.
okay?
so who's working with students?
Housing staff or.
Residential, is it residential life
Student
staff?
affairs, yeah, student affairs, housing,
And student affairs?
housing is within student affairs.
Okay, so residential life staff work with students to develop, and this again, students who want to do this, ethnically and culturally based theme floors in campus housing. Okay, comments, Marcos and then Maria.
I would just say, I'm really comfortable taking students out of that equation. I think that at other campuses, they have ethnic-themed dorms, and those dorms exist because the campus recognizes it's an important thing. Students self-identify into those dorms and say, I want to be a part of that, because it gives them a sense of feeling home, feeling safe, feeling welcome. But then students from other ethnicities also opt in and have that opportunity to learn from and be part of that.
Absolutely.
It then also becomes a source of programming for the
got
rest
it.
of the university.
Maria?
I was going to say something similar.
Go right
I would
ahead.
like to see language that says that students can work with faculty and
Yeah.
staff to request these themed dorms, because I think some
not faculty and
administrators think it's easy to ignore students, but I think when it's a coalition of students, faculty, and staff, then it carries more weight.
Thank you. Rick?
I'm actually going to speak to 20, 21, and 23 because they kind of all come together. Two of them were mine.
Are we still talking about 20?
Well, we're still talking about 20, but
Okay.
20 really ties into my 22,
Okay.
which I was talking about, explore the restatement of multicultural themed community.
Gotcha.
But in 21, one of the things that was really enlightening to me is that there's really not a good process for the establishment of these themed dorms. They said, well, we expect for our students to come to us, and the students are already out the door. So what is the process, and how are we determining what the need is for the community? We have these small community populations, these small ethnicities. Are they expected to pick up the mantle and say, we need a themed floor in this community when they're worried about what's going on campus? So one of the things, so what I'm saying they're tying in is that there really needs to be a true and better process. I am completely comfortable taking the students out of this, looking at what really needs to be and how do we support the different ethnicities and different cultures and LGBT community on this campus to make sure that we have a presence of an environment where people can feel comfortable.
So where are we on, let's see,
So
who did I
my
say was next?
suggestion was just to remove students from the formation of, not from the participation in,
Okay,
right?
okay. But are we saying, I know, we're going to get to you, but I'm hearing one thing, which is just form these dorms, these ethnic, whatever you want to call them. What are we calling them?
Multicultural.
Multicultural dorm. All right, we're just saying, one is, the recommendation, just to the university, make this happen. All right, that's one recommendation. Another one is, no, the process is, see if students have interest, and then students work with faculty and staff, and go to the university, which we're saying is encouraging them to establish seats. That's something else I'm hearing, and maybe I'm not hearing it accurately, so let me go back to Chris, then over to this side here, to Linda or Delorme. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so I agree with what I'm assuming is the spirit of what we're talking about here, and that is to have themed dorms that really, create a space for multiculturalism to kind of thrive. I think we have to be very careful with how we use language here, though. I don't want us to write it out in a way that's a little too open to interpretation, because when you have the first group that says, we want a white ethnic dorm, that's a dorm that is all about white people.
That's right.
I think you have to be very careful with how you do the language. I fully support multicultural dorms. I really support the idea of having dorms where maybe there's some themes in there that really, celebrate various cultural groups, celebrate, Latino heritage, Puerto Rican heritage, Mexican heritage, African American heritage, African diaspora heritage, even including, and I'm certainly not saying it to exclude white Americans by any means, but I think that before we start to get too specific in how we parse out these ethnic dorms, that's something that we really have to be concerned with. So I'm not, this is a friendly amendment, I guess you would say, to what is being said, and that is that I think we need to be very careful about how we craft the language before we put it in stone.
Do you have a proposal?
Give me a few minutes so I can let the
All right.
ideas marinate on that. I don't
All
want
right.
I don't want to flippantly say something.
That's fine. Delorme, and then
Yeah.
Linda.
I think I'm more inclined to go with multicultural themed dorms. I've seen them working on different campuses and working very successfully, and working in the way, in fact, that he just described. And I think that the reason why I'm pushing this issue is you can't talk about diversity as an idea. As an idea, we've got the numbers, and therefore we're a diverse campus. We've got to start building on this campus the underpinnings of all of that. And that cannot be driven by students. That has to be driven by the combination of faculty, staff, and the administration. If you're going to have a diverse campus, then build it. It's not just the numbers of the people that are here.
Linda?
Yeah, I think I may not have stated what I was trying to express clearly enough. I was not saying that I was not encouraging putting this responsibility on the students, okay? What I was trying to acknowledge is that, what Gary mentioned, I am aware of students who are already working on this, have been doing research about how this functions on other campuses. I want them to be included in the process. So that's actually what I was trying to convey. And I'm 100% in agreement with multicultural language rather than ethnicity.
All right, Michael, Ellen, Peter.
Okay, I want to yield over to Gary.
And very
Clyde,
quickly,
Washington.
because we're going to move
Gary?
on from there, okay?
I just want to say that I strongly disagree with the notion of excluding students from the formation process, especially considering the fact that students have already submitted proposals, done research, and have already taken the initiative to put this forward. And also, how can you do something for students without including them in that process?
Okay.
No one knows students better than students ourselves.
Got it. Okay. Peter, Ellen, okay, let's go. Come on.
So, yeah, I was just actually going to echo exactly what Gary
Okay.
just
I
said.
don't want
so
people to say
go
what
ahead,
already's
yeah.
been said,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
give me
So-
something new. This would drive me crazy, by the way, in court with lawyers. You know, as the colleague just said, I was like, no.
But
just-
this is
We got it.
academia.
We got it. Academia, it's
Sorry.
even worse. Okay, Ellen, go ahead.
I agree with what's been said so far, but in terms of the, no, let me finish. Let me finish. If there's some group of students that want to come together and form a white identity floor, we need, and I agree about the language stuff, that's concerning, but I want them to explore their European American history, the oppressions, their white privilege. That needs to be part, and I don't know how to do that.
All right, Peter, anything? Okay, so let me throw out some language. Establish, this is a recommendation to the university, to the president. Establish multicultural themed dorms with input of students, faculty, and staff. That's all.
Perfect.
That's it. Moving on. Okay, and that takes numbers 20, 21, 22. Okay, so that'll be 20, 21, 22. It is now 10 till 7. We have covered 23 plus, my goodness, we have covered 32 of the recommendations, and we have a short list now. This is Frosh orientation, and sorry, folks, we got to keep moving. 23 is out, because that was part of the selection one. Yes.
Sorry to do this, but I had one related to housing that I wanted to add if possible. I'll just say it real quickly.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious.
No,
I'm dead
I'm
serious.
joking, I'm joking.
I'm dead serious.
Go ahead.
That the RLC and ARLC job requirements include demonstrated knowledge, skill, and experience working with diverse students.
Read it again for us.
That the RLC and ARLC job descriptions, job requirements include demonstrated knowledge, skill, and experience working with diverse students.
I think that's good with me. I like it. All right. I need you to write it for me, and will you email it to me, please? Okay. We're on to Frosh orientation. There are 6 recommendations. 1, include explicit and substantial programming about race in Frosh orientation. That is not to the exclusion of other protected groups. But that's because I said the hypothetical, there was nothing about race in their last, at least the last group of training. Okay, so it's not to the exclusion of others. All right, we're in. All right, a sliding scale, $0 to $400 for, I guess there's a Frosh orientation fee. And
Yes, when
it is
when
there-
they came, they
right.
said it was $250.
That's correct.
They also said that there was a 50% fee waiver. I looked for that. I could not find it anywhere online. I'm a advisor here also, a faculty advisor, and I see students after they've attended orientation, invariably, they say it was a waste of time.
Well, before we get to the substance, let's just talk about the fee right now. We'll get to the thing. So the recommendation is there be a sliding scale, because the first-year students have to pay a fee for orientation, and right now it's $250. Many students don't have that, and they say we were told there was a sliding scale of some sort. Was that right?
There was a waiver.
A waiver.
50% waiver.
Right, so they still have to pay $125. The recommendation is there should be a sliding scale that some students could attend this without paying anything, and you have 0 to 400. So in a way, there's kind of a making up for the money that doesn't come in. Questions? Yes.
As a student, $400 is a lot, and a lot of parents may not be able to pay that, or students would have to pay out of pocket for that. So a sliding scale of up to 400 is a little too much, I
Okay,
would say.
go to Peter.
That also concerns me, given that freshman orientation is a mandatory event, and if you do not attend, you will have your admission be rescinded. So I'm afraid of forcing students into a position that they cannot pay, but they would also not be able to attend the
Okay,
university.
Michael?
So I think it's too much.
Also, as one of the advisors who actually does orientation, I'm aware that there's a lot more to the financing of orientation than what was presented to us. So I don't think that this body has the knowledge to start setting
Yeah.
what the scale should be.
All right, do
I
you think
made
there's?
this recommendation because I personally know of students who have not registered because they could not afford to come to orientation.
So-
$400 would
Hold-
be for a family that could afford $400, and it would be sliding fee scale based on a person's ability to pay. I feel it's untenable that students who are admitted would not come because they cannot afford the orientation
I have a
fee.
suggestion then, that the recommendation be a sliding fee scale for orientation, 0, and let the university can determine the other amount, okay? Because we don't know, 250, they have 250 now. We could say 0 to 250, but what the important part for me is getting the 0 part, that some people can get a waiver, because some students cannot afford it, and it's unfair. It's just not fair. So we could say sliding scale with a bottom of 0, and the university can determine what that top is, because we're not in a position to do that. All right, moving on. Okay, I'll reword it. Number 3, appoint a committee that will examine orientation at other campuses that have reported success. And then let's go, Maria, so you were talking to this one.
Yes, I kind of combined
That's
these
all right,
two
go ahead.
because I'm very passionate about this. I speak with many, many students every year, and they feel that the orientation year is a waste of time. And I think that there were some excellent recommendations made in some of the emails we received in terms of types of orientation that don't happen all at once because it's just overwhelming for them, and they can't process all the information that's given to them. So I would like to have a committee examine orientation programs at other campuses, look at the assessment and evaluation of those orientations, and attempt to structure an orientation that would fit our student population.
Observations, and by the way, you've kind of also included number 4, because that was Delorme's about pacing it out, that too much information is given out at one time and students get hit with too much. Michael?
Once again, our orientation did not fall out of the sky. So if anything, I'd recommend there be a committee that reviews the stuff that the other committee that created orientation looked at. I think there's a lot of presumption that stuff fell out the sky because we don't know about it, nobody's looked at it. But that's simply not true. So again, in the context of not reinventing the wheel, I think people should review the information that exists. And if you have questions, go to the people.
Are you opposed to a
Yes.
committee that would, let me finish the question. Are you opposed to a committee that would examine orientation at other campuses? So I'm just talking to Mike so we can hear it.
Yes,
So you're opposed to that because
because it's been done.
that's been done. Okay, Peter?
So, 2 things. So coming from an orientation leader that did work this past summer, maybe I'm confused about why students felt it was a waste of time. Because personally, from the groups of students that I've worked with for the entire summer, I have not had a single student feel that way. So maybe I'm wondering how we can better address the waste of time factor. Second thing, if we're looking at drawing out orientation to be a longer, more paced out process, we do need to consider the financial implications, because as it is, one night overnight here is really expensive for the campus, given that some students have to fly out from another state, drive all the way from Los Angeles. How would we accommodate them for more than just 2 days? Because as it is, there is a lot of information, but at the same time, the reason why it's so packed is because students don't necessarily have that time. We don't necessarily have the capability to afford a 2-night stay in the dorms.
Got it. Good point. Ellen?
I just want to also say that I have heard, and I'm sure there are a lot of students who took a lot from the orientation, but I have also heard from a lot of students that it was too packed, too much information. And in fact, I'm hearing from students who said the orientation, depending on the presenters, is not very welcoming. It's not very positive. It's very negatively focused and don't fail this, don't do that. And we need to have a committee also to examine, again, the campus climate starts from the orientation, and I would recommend that.
Okay, a very important point about orientation, it does set the tone. And if we have some members here saying they have been getting feedback, and I've heard many students, several students saying it didn't do it for them, we need, this is really important, like really, really important. So that's just an observation. I'll go to Gary, then I'll go to Maria, and then to Peter.
I just want to chime in on a discussion about orientation being a waste of time. I'm actually a student who had a positive experience at orientation, life-changing even. I wouldn't be here where I am today if not for the orientation sessions that I went to. So clearly, if done right, orientation can be a positive. Essentially, it is what we make it. I knew what I was looking for at orientation. I knew what sessions I wanted to go to. I wanted to go to the Greek session, but those sessions has to exist. That session has to exist. So essentially, if an African American student or a Latino student wants to go find African American or Latino orgs, like that sessions should exist so that they can find it. Again, it's what we make it, and you can have a positive experience if we make the proper recommendations or the proper sessions are made.
And who did I say was next? I'm forgetting who I, there we go. Maria, and then Peter.
Gary, I'm glad you had a positive experience, but I've also heard, Ellen, that there's a very punitive approach to providing the information. And I was not suggesting that students stay for 2 or 3 days here. I was saying rather that the information be paced. Maybe the beginning of the semester when they come here, but just give them essential information and make sure that it's not overwhelming to them.
Peter.
So I want to speak a little bit to the process of orientation. I do understand that a lot of students experience a lot of information overload. I think a lot of that happens, though, in the class registration and class advisory process. There are 2 pieces to orientation. There's a time that us orientation leaders spend with the students, and that's bonding with them, doing activities with them, doing small group conversation. The other piece is a time that we bring them to the classrooms where they learn from an advisor about how they register for classes, what they should be taking. That's where a lot of the punitive information comes in, because that's when they're learning about classes they cannot take, they have to take, what happens if they fail. So when we're looking at changing the process for orientation, I think most of that falls into the advisory piece, because with the orientation leaders, we don't do as much advising on classes or the punishments or the mandatory stuff. That's mostly on the advisors when they're registering for classes and learning about classes. So I do want to make it clear that if we're looking at changing the orientation process, we need to involve those advisors of those colleges, because those are the ones that are presenting all of that information. And I think a lot of the information overload happens because if they didn't get that information while registering for classes, they wouldn't get classes. So given that they're only allowed about 2 hours to sign up for classes, we have to give them that information before they can sign up. So I'm not sure how we give them information about signing up for classes when classes start. I think that's the timeline issue.
Okay, anything else? I have a suggestion, a proposal to make on this one. Given how important Frosh orientation is, it does set the tone. Given that I deem it to be fact, well, I have 2 members here who are actively involved on the campus who say that they have heard students say, not good, there are problems with it. Given the importance of it and taking into consideration Michael's point that this isn't just something that fell out of the sky, it's been worked on, looked at, that doesn't mean it can't be made better. So I'm going to reword it a little bit, and it says, appoint a committee of faculty, staff, students, and administrators to reassess Frosh orientation, period. Yes, Maria.
I would like to include transfer orientation.
That was what I was gonna
And
say.
Frosh and transfer.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let me read it again. Appoint a committee of faculty, staff, students, and administrators to reassess Frosh orientation and transfer orientation. That's our recommendation. They jump on it and they do it, and we hope they do it meaningfully. All right? Okay, I noticed that the next, let's see, number 4, orientation of new students. Okay, so we covered that. I'm taking that number 4, basically taking it out, because if it's reassessed, they're going to look at all of these issues. Okay, and I hope that. By the way, let me just finish. I hope that members of our task force, particularly Ellen and Maria, will participate or be chosen to be on that Frosh orientation. And I'm encouraging that. I might even put that in there. Okay, Gary.
In regards to number 4, before we discard it without analyzing it, I want to, again, say that we should try to get some of the rationale behind it, because if we're talking about phasing students in over time, there's a purpose behind that.
Okay, we're not discarding it. That's going to be a part of the whole review of Frosh orientation.
So are we going to recommend that students still should still be exposed to diversity support resources over time, or are we doing that recommendation in particular?
Can we include that language in the
Yes.
revised ordinance?
Why don't we do that? Why don't I say, in the first one, appoint a committee to reassess and consider these following issues, including but not limited to. And then it would be orientation of new students about campus diversity and support services. So I'll include that in, okay? All right, so let me take that language and put that in to number 3. Okay. I noticed 5 and 6 are out of place. They shouldn't be in Frosh orientation. I think I was kind of zoned out on all this. And we've covered them. Yes, we've covered them.
Page 1, number 8.
So give me those again. Number 5 was,
Page 1, number 6.
hold on a second. Page 1, number 6, and,
Page 1, number 8.
thank you. We have now covered 30, let's see, how many have we covered already? Oh, my God. Let's see. 23 and 9 and, okay. Yep, 23 and 9, 32. We have covered 38 recommendations. We have 40 to go. We're not going to cover them all tonight. So it's your choice. We know we can do 38 in an hour and a half. No, I'm serious, because we've had long days here. I mean, all day before getting here. We have one more meeting. We can use that if you want to complete the remaining 40, which are reporting procedures and policies, and then campus climate, or we can go ahead and do reporting procedures and stop there. There are 11 of those, and then take up the next one with the campus climate, of which there are 28. What's your pleasure? Stop now, keep going?
Keep going.
Keep going.
All right, keep going. Yes, Gary?
Well, I did have a question since we, since you just talked about us only having one more meeting.
Two more meetings.
Oh, 2 more meetings.
Yes.
Oh, well, awesome. Is there any possibility of getting specific diversity resources, like a panel on the specific diversity resources that are on campus, or do we not have enough time
Probably,
for that?
my guess is probably not. Let's do this. We're on a time limit now. We want to get through these recommendations, and I just want us to get through those, and then if by some miracle we finish everything, the next meeting, we might want to consider for our final.
30
to
minutes
do
or an
that.
hour, something like that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, but right now, priorities these. So are we all on board for another 20, what do we got, 24 minutes or so? Okay, reporting procedures and policies. First one, create a link on the San Jose State website that directly goes right to the campus police and to now, there was a proposal, did we cover this? No, we haven't yet. So on the campus climate, there's a proposal, the first one from Professor Murray, to create an Office of Diversity. So I want to just talk for a second about that. I don't know if San Jose State has ever had such a thing. If you have, I'd like to hear a little bit about it, because what I envision with this recommendation is that if you look at an organizational chart for San Jose State, this person who runs the diversity office will report directly to the president, that it gets that kind of status, and does a whole lot to ensure to deal with campus climate, diversity, resources, and the whole bit. So I'm curious, I know this is a little bit of a side from this, but it goes to this recommendation. Was there a diversity kind of office before?
Yeah.
And does it still exist? Is
No, it was 3 presidents ago, I think.
What was it called?
It was the campus climate. It was the vice president, and it was campus climate.
No, it wasn't a vice president. It was actually when, what I'm thinking of is when Rona was a special assistant to the
See,
president
I was thinking of
on
Gay
campus
Gray.
diversity. Oh, there was one before that?
Yeah. It was
Oh,
Gay
okay, then
Gray,
you're
so that
remembering
was
something I'm
before
not.
All right,
Rona.
hold on. So there was something that existed.
Yes.
It wasn't called the Office of Diversity.
No, it was not.
No, it's
But-
campus climate.
Campus climate, okay. All right, so it doesn't exist now.
It was a position.
It was a position, it was not an office. All right, so the proposal here, we'll get to it at our next meeting, is an office. That is a person with a staff, okay, that oversees all this stuff. Chris? Use the mic, you gotta use the mic. So
Sorry. We have a former faculty and administrator that's in the audience that I'm looking at that I believe was in charge of that office quite a long time ago.
Okay, all right, I appreciate it.
I don't know
So,
what the name
let me,
is.
let me go, we'll talk more about that at our next meeting, and we may want some input from that person. But for now, the proposal's first recommendation is put a link on the website. So if you observe a bias-based incident, which is different from a hate crime, or a hate crime, that you can go right to that link, and type it in, send it right off to the campus police and also to the Office of Diversity if one were to exist, so that, and you could also do this anonymously, 'cause some people do not want to be, have their names out. Anyway, that's the recommendation. Create the link, make it, and then, of course, make sure everybody knows about it. Yes, Rick?
Well, for one, I really like the suggestion, but what you just described, are you talking about simultaneous reporting, or would they select where it goes? I would hope that it'd be simultaneous reporting.
I don't know.
and
I
if
don't know.
it's
I'm not
not a
sure what you
crime-
mean.
So, I'm sorry?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. What do you-
So that when they report, it goes to the campus
places.
police, the Office of
That's right.
Diversity,
That's what
the
I
Vice
said.
President,
Yeah.
rather than saying, well, I don't know if it's a crime, so I won't report it there.
No,
But-
this goes to the campus police and to the Office of Diversity.
Okay.
Period. So somebody's sitting in the classroom and they see something that just they feel is really inappropriate, and they just don't want to say anything, come forward, of some place where they can go, hit the link, and obviously, if campus police get something, they're no, when we can have that conversation, I'm sure, with the police, it's not a crime. But if somebody is very concerned, remember we got an email, this task force did, about a student observed something in a classroom that they thought was just not good and didn't know where to go to bring the concern. So this, if they wanted to do it this way, it would go to the Office of Diversity. Yes.
I guess my concern with this kind of stuff is it's one of these feel-good things. It's like, but when you put flesh and blood on it, if I'm sitting there and, especially with the anonymous part, I mean, I'm trying to play this out in my mind, and I see as much abuse of it. I see more of that than the good. I mean, I understand it makes people feel good. I can hit this link.
What
but-
is you're saying you don't want, you oppose the recommendation, you don't want a website link? I just need to,
Yeah,
all right, that's all,
yeah.
okay, got it. Others? Okay, so how do y'all feel? Okay, I think it's important, and I think a
I
lot of
like-
people don't want to say their names.
I
but
like
they're
the general idea. I'm a little bit concerned about being overly prescriptive for all kinds of reasons, and one of it is that our website has hard time functioning as it is.
Well,
And
this is Silicon Valley.
we all keep saying that, I can tell
All
you.
right.
But all
Okay.
I'm saying is that it seems to me that just like some of the other recommendations, it would be better to have a group of people who have the technical expertise as well as the
Yes.
goal
But one would
working
hope,
together.
one would hope the university would get the technical people together to establish the link. I mean, I don't think we have to be that specific. It's just, let's create the link.
I was just being consistent with the
Yeah.
other recommendations.
Yeah, I got you. No, I got you. And I appreciate that. But I think this is just, I don't want to overcomplicate it. Just create a link. That's all. Yeah.
It's not that easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
In general, I think it's a good idea, but I think it's a good idea predicated on the level of training, that people understand what a hate crime or a bias incident is. Because I could see easily where it would happen, that there could be some confusion about that, and even with the best of intentions, where people are reporting things in a way that gets a little confusing. So I just want to make sure that
Sure.
that's kind of explicitly
Sure.
said, that comes along
Okay.
with training on.
So Linda, I don't want to put down what you just said. So that's not my intention at all. I'm just trying to, I just don't want to overcomplicate this. I understand the training, and I will tell you, people call the police and report stuff that's not crimes. They do sometimes, because they kind of don't get it. So, I mean, clearly, the universities have to pick up on, educating people that it exists and what it's to be used for. And again, I'm not defining that it has to be, this specifically. Got it? But I'm just saying there needs to be a place where people can go to report.
I agree-
That's
I
all.
agree with that.
And some sort of a link. That's all. Okay? Yes. Can we move on? Yes.
Yeah, I want to say that I agree. I'm in support of this recommendation, and that I agree with both Michael and Chris's concerns about, one, the anonymous factor. We want these to be serious reports, and second of all, we don't want it's related to Chris' comment, we don't want it to be abused in the form of anonymity, but also we don't want it to be abused. For example, we don't want someone reporting the Black Student Union as racist. something like that. Like they
Gary,
need
you're
to
not
be-
going to stop people from doing that. That's my point. I mean, people are going to abuse, people abuse everything. You know, you have the rules, but you hope that most of the people on this campus are responsible. I believe that. But trust me, they have this link, you're going to get some very foolish stuff going on. It's going to happen, but that's life. Moving on, number 2, create a mobile app for smartphones to report incidents of hate crimes and incidents of bias-based. Diana?
We already do have a app, so I would say add that as part of the app.
So what's the app now? What does it do? Can I report some incident that I've just seen on the campus by going to the app?
I'm saying as one of the recommendations
Yeah.
to add like a.
So there
part
is
of-
an existing app now,
Mhm.
and you're saying then add the ability to do that? Is that, am I getting it?
Yes.
Okay, so add it to the existing app. And what's the app called? Is there a name for it? SJSU Mobile. Got it.
I thought you were talking about Tips Now. No? There's a Tips Now that's for safety issues, but
Okay.
none of this is obviously not very well advertised.
So there's
So
Tips
there needs
Now?
to be very well advertised and what the functions are for.
Okay, so there's Tips Now, and that's a mobile app?
It could be a texting, it
Could be, gotta use a mic.
It could be texting, it could be phone call.
That's-
I'm not sure about the mobile app.
Okay, so that's Tips Now, and then there's another San Jose State mobile app, right? Okay, so the recommendation is, do we want to do this on both, on Tips Now and on, or is it no? Yes, Peter?
So from my understanding, at least with Tips Now, is that the one that's kind of advertised in like the parking garages? And that one, I think, is more for crime in general.
Got
I'm
it.
not
So
sure if
this
it's-
is not what this is.
It's safety, yeah, more safety related as opposed to specifically,
Oh, okay.
hate crimes and
Okay,
bias-based
so I'm back to Diana's suggestion, which was take the existing mobile app and then add the ability to be able to report these kinds of incidents. Okay? All right. Willie?
Just a question, doesn't the existing mobile app connect to the SJSU website?
We need to-
San Jose,
Could
STSU Mobile does connect to the website. It actually does not have crime reporting in San Jose, STSU Mobile.
Well, I know, I just thought if we're putting it on the website, the mobile actually connects to that
Well,
website.
So we'll kind of connect these two, all right, to see if, so we don't duplicate effort, all right, got it. The 3, ensure that the VP of Student Affairs, VP of Finance, and other executive level officials and the campus police promptly inform the Office of the President and the Cabinet of conduct that is or may be viewed as constituting hate crimes. And that was the big gap, remember, in the reporting up the ladder. And I only mentioned these 2 positions because they were mentioned in the fact-finding report, that's all. My guess is the President's office has already gotten on this, but.
Chair Corder,
Right.
what is promptly? Are we talking within 24 hours? Can we, what is promptly?
It means immediately. Maybe I should change the word. It means immediately. They know this, they should notify the President's office. So is it all right? I'm going to change the word to immediately?
Yeah.
It's more formal. Okay. 4, ensure that the university's response to bias-based misconduct is as immediate as it is for other forms of misconduct. And that's where I picked up on something Gary said at one of our meetings about, he said in the dorms, somebody breaks the rules, drugs, beer, whatever, there's, immediate action. This one took a while before things got even, once it was found out, it was still 5 weeks before the students were out of the dorm, whatever. So that's all. And comments, whatever. Gary?
I just want to say it would benefit the university to implement immediate bias response. It could probably save $5 million next time, just saying.
Okay. Number 5, a link installed on the housing website where residents can feel free to address any concerns with the option of anonymity. Responses could be made to the general page, eliminating the need for one's personal email to contact them.
Yeah, so that second half seems like a bit confusing. So it's just the main part would be that first
Okay.
sentence.
All right. A link on the housing website, so you're in housing and you have a concern, right?
And I just based this on when I asked the board last time, if they had any anonymous way. I didn't find it anonymous at all. They had to show their face.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, good one, all right. 6, the chief of police department, the campus, and the university administration review the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between Santa Clara County law enforcement agencies and the Santa Clara County Network for a Hate-Free Community to ensure familiarity with the terms of the MOU and compliance with the best practices in the document. This document should be reviewed in concert with the Santa Clara County Chiefs of Police Association and the Santa Clara County Network for a Hate-Free Community. Any problem with that? I think it's really good. Moving on. Administration, in collaboration with the faculty, senate, and student leaders, review all campus policies specific to bias, discrimination, hate violence, and bullying to determine the adequacy of the policies. Basically, it's a review. Look at all these policies and see if they are up to what they should be. And it's a long sentence, Delorme.
Yeah, I know
That's
it
a
is.
long
And not
sentence.
just review
Yes.
what exists, fill in the
And-
gaps.
Yeah, well, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
You see loopholes, you see something missing. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, right down here. Okay, Peter?
So this is just a question about process. So when you say student leaders, do you mean student government leaders, student organization leaders, leaders within clubs? How would that process work, and how would we
Quick
be
answer.
involved?
However that's organized here at this school.
Say it again, please.
However the leadership is organized here at this school. So if it is government leaders, appointed leaders, elected leaders.
All right, next up. Ellen, no, it's Michael.
I would add to that staff, since most likely the administrators are not going to be the people to implement this, the police department's not going to implement this.
So
and
you
the
said
faculty.
add what language now?
Staff,
And
the people who have to actually implement this stuff.
All right, and Linda?
It's very quick. We actually have a academic senate, not faculty senate, which is quite different.
Changing the words? Okay. All right. Number 8, all policies specific to bias, discrimination, hate violence, and bullying should include a matrix with time-certain periods for documenting and communicating awareness of incidents of bias, discrimination, hate, blah, 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 the action taken and recommended actions to be taken in response to the incident. So Delorme, you're envisioning what? Some
Okay.
sort of a,
If you're going to have the policies and procedures, I want timelines for when they're certainly to be completed, that's all.
so that's when they are to could be completed. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
For example, if you hear of a hate crime, and like we've said in a previous recommendation, it gets reported immediately,
Yes.
it gets responded
Within
to
24
immediately.
hours.
And so there's a matrix where people understand that this is supposed to happen.
So that could be a part of your, well, it's
Yeah,
7
the
and 8. No,
previous
no.
7 and 8, the
It's,
same.
no, it's separate. It's part of what you would want in this review. You want,
Right.
the outcome is to be a matrix. All right? Everybody, nobody, okay? That? Number 9, develop an emergency response plan for significant incidents or near campus, on or near campus, that may impact the campus and surrounding communities' sense of well-being in the wake of incidents of bias, discrimination, hate, violence, or bullying. Emergency response plan. So what are we talking about here?
Basically, a rapid response plan.
But what do I mean, let's talk about, give me an incident like what?
Okay, shooting on campus.
Okay.
And kids find out about it in the paper the next day rather than finding out about it on
Okay,
campus.
gotcha. All right, Peter?
Okay.
So there is an SJSU alert. Not sure how effective it is because there are a lot of text messages that I don't receive, but there is an alert system when something happens on campus. As soon as the report is filed, students do get text messages with the details pushed to their phone. That's not to speak towards its efficiency or its effectiveness, because as a student here, there are a lot of text messages that I don't receive, but that system is in place, so maybe we can expand on it, maybe improve its efficiency.
Okay, so I have review and, what's the other word? Something at the campus's emergency response plan. But what is it? Review and, Linda.
I'm sorry, I just needed some clarification, because you mentioned shooting, but this is actually addressing well-being in wake of bias, discrimination, hate, violence, or bullying. Certainly, violence would
Right.
be an immediate alert, and that's, SJS alert is only for emergencies
Got it.
that have immediate safety issues.
So like
Right,
shootings and all that.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
it's like this incident that
But
happened, that
bias
wouldn't
would
be an
not be
emergency
an emergency
response.
No,
alert.
it would not.
Okay, but
So,
bias would suggest that, and so
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying that's a little bit confusing, because I don't know how you do an emergency
You
alert on
don't.
bias.
well, you
So,
wouldn't.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll take out bias and discrimination and go for hate violence,
But
which would
what
be a
is-
crime.
But they
But
have an
that would be
emergency
the same
response
already
plan.
that exists, I think.
I'm
It should be covered.
thinking,
If it's anything physical, where there's physical safety.
yeah, so
issues,
let's
Okay.
decide what we want to do. Do you want to go forward? Yes, Ellen?
I actually agree with having some kind of response plan, kind of tied to the time matrix.
To what, though?
But not necessarily emergency only, but I want to know when there's a bias incident,
Yeah.
who gets notified, is counseling, for example, called, and who gets to help with the student on their well-being issues, and who's called in for education and dialogue. So that
So we
I
could
believe
change
would
it
be
to,
important.
Like rapid response plan?
No, I just think, Delorme, you had your recommendations, we have 7 and 8, that talk about reviewing all of these policies and developing a matrix, and then we should have the next one that also says, it could be a matrix, or it could be whatever, it specifies what are the responses, counseling, RAs, presence, and how that works.
Yes.
Instead of, so it's not emergency
fine.
response, it's, what do we call it, it's, sure, okay, so we're going to call it campus,
It's a coordinated response.
I like that, so we'll
Yeah.
call, so we're going to put in, I'm suggesting develop a campus, a coordinated campus response matrix to incidents of bias, discrimination, hate, violence, or bullying. So in other words, when these incidents are reported, there needs to be, and we all need to know, what are the responses this university is going to have, and define them. Okay?
All
Does that work?
Question.
Yes.
Now, I agree with them, because a lot of these things come to my desk. There's a lot of investigation that goes on. A lot of things that come out as something in the investigation occurred, it wasn't what everyone thought it was. A lot of these things are resolved behind closed doors. Some things are settled, some punishments are occurred that are part of personnel records. And so, I agree that there should be some response to these incidents, but just trying to figure out how you deal with, a lot goes on that is not
Public.
not public, or in fact really does need investigation.
But we're not saying public, if I might,
Yeah.
so if there's a matrix, and let's say there's an incident in the dorm,
Mhm.
everybody on the campus should know, here's what's going to happen. It will be reported within 24 hours. It will be investigated.
Then fine with that.
Counseling will be, these are the things. So it isn't that this is some big public thing.
These are
But-
the kinds of things that occur in
And
investigation.
this is the matrix. This is what should happen, and what this university is saying will happen when these things happen. Okay? So I couldn't tell you what it is now either, and define it, who does what, and that's it. So it isn't about broadcasting anything, but it's about knowing what happens, and everybody will know. Okay? Is that all right, matrix?
I think that's all right, but I think you also need to capture that there is a community that this campus is on, and there are times when the well-being of the community is also involved. How do you integrate that?
You're talking about the surrounding community?
Yes.
I don't know. So for now, I have
We don't
develop
have-
a coordinated campus response matrix to incidents of bias, discrimination, hate, violence, or bullying. At least we'll know
All
what
right.
that is. 10, all administration, faculty, staff, and students be provided a copy or link to policies, procedures, and forms that will assist the campus to develop and maintain open and transparent, just process for reporting incidents.
So we've talked about that before.
Yes, we have.
That's
And
redundant.
is it included in?
Yes, it is.
In which one? So I want to make sure I don't leave it out. So let me know. And then we go to 11, policies, procedures, and communication matrices regarding bias, discrimination, violence, and bullying should be included in all staff trainings and posted for students to see at any given time. Sounds good to me. Policies, procedures.
Actually, you want to just add one more, and let me know if we already did this and
I'm sorry, you're going to add another recommendation?
real quickly.
Before we do
Okay,
that,
go
let me just, for this one, all right? So what about number 11? Linda?
I would suggest adding faculty, because faculty orientation when they first come, I think faculty should also be receiving the same.
Everybody all right with that? Good one. All right, so I've added faculty, that's number 11. And number 10 we just did, where does that connect it to, Delorme? Did you find? Anybody find where number 10 is already, this was provide a link, but I think she said it was covered. If not, you know what? I'll check it off as we'll include it, and then if it's another one, I'll find it out. Okay, so we have Michael, and we have 1 minute.
And I just
we're
want to say
done.
that residents should be informed or kept abreast of the incidents when they occur on the premises.
So when you, what incidents, though?
Of
mean, what-
hate crime and bias incidents.
But, So crimes don't get determined until
Yeah, I'm just
people are
saying
convicted.
whenever they do, because one of the biggest problems when we brought the students together to talk about it was that the residents weren't kept in the loop about what was going on, so they had to hear about it on the news. So I'm just saying, once something has been determined,
So people arrested, charges filed, that kind of stuff.
yeah, so that people understand what's going on in the dorm. Like, you know, if I'm sitting there and people being carried out or whatever's going on, the residents
So
actually,
who informs the residents?
Right.
Who?
it should be the director of housing.
All right, so give me your recommendation again.
The director of housing should send out a communication to residents whenever there's an I'll just use the term incident of concern to the communities within that.
Hold on. We'll call them incidents of concern. Could it be any kind of major, okay, incidents. I'm going to using your terminology right now. I may change it to major.
Right. Incidents of concern.
Okay,
to
to
that
residents?
residential facility.
I'm going to put to campus residents.
Okay,
All
works for
right.
me.
All right, that's number 12. Is everybody okay with that? Letting people know what's going on? All right, we have now concluded, and it's 7:30 on the dot, and we now have only one section left, and that'll be at our next meeting, Campus Climate. We have 28 recommendations. We'll go through all of those, and then we'll have one final meeting after that to present our final recommendations to the university. Thank you all so much. All right.